My name is Audrey Morgan. I'm 22 years old. And this is the story of how I learned what it means to be invisible in your own family, until the world couldn't ignore me anymore. The cake was melting. That's what I remember first. A cheap sheet cake with frosting that looked like someone had swiped it on in the dark. It said, "Happy birthday, Savannah." That wasn't my name. Not exactly. My name is Audrey. The cake was for me. Or it was supposed to be. But the messed up name, the missing candles, the fact that no one even bothered to spell check something meant to celebrate my life, it told the real story. I was turning 18. It should have been a milestone. Instead, I was seated at a plastic folding table in the backyard with 3 neighbor kids I barely knew. No balloons. No music. Not even a say cheese moment. Just a half-hearted celebration for the daughter they called Simple, while my older sister Brielle had her princess party at the Italian place downtown, live violinist, edible gold dust on the cake, and a dress that cost more than my entire college textbook list. That's how things always were. Brielle was the favorite. The fragile one. The chosen one. And I was the fallback plan. My mom always said it like a compliment, "Audrey doesn't need much. She's grounded." Grounded. It's funny how that word sounds like praise but feels like prison. Whenever Brielle failed a class, Mom took days off to help her study. When I brought home straight A's, she barely looked up from her phone. "Good job, kiddo," she'd mutter. And that was that. At 11, I got the flu so bad I couldn't stand. But no one was home. Mom had taken Brielle to ballet. I remember lying on the bathroom floor, clutching a towel, my skin burning, shivering, and whispering, "Help." But no one came. When I told Mom later, she blinked and said, "Well, you're strong. You made it through." That became the refrain of my life. You're strong. You're fine. You don't need help. So they never gave it. Brielle got a DSLR camera at 13 because she said she might want to try photography. I got hand-me-down notebooks with bent spines to keep writing in, even though I'd won my first statewide writing contest in 9th grade. I remember standing on that stage in a wrinkled dress I'd ironed myself, scanning the audience. They weren't there. Mom texted later, "Sorry, sweetie. Brielle's skating competition was at the same time. But I'm sure you were amazing." No, Mom. I wasn't amazing. I was invisible. By high school, I stopped asking for anything. Not rides. Not help. Not advice. I got a job at a bakery to save money for college. I studied late, slept less, worked weekends. Meanwhile, Brielle was off to a $3,000 summer acting camp in New York City, paid for by the same parents who said, "Audrey, honey, state college is more realistic for someone like you." When I got accepted to Brown, I didn't tell anyone. I knew what they'd say. So I went to the University of Georgia instead, where I had a full tuition scholarship but still had to pay for everything else on my own. The day I left for school, no one even walked me out. I rolled my suitcase down the driveway alone. Mom opened the bedroom window, waved vaguely, then disappeared. My dorm was 150 square feet with stained walls and a cracked ceiling. My roommate Natalie had a matching bed set and a box of gifts from home. I had a teddy bear with one ear missing and a second-hand laptop that barely turned on without a charger. But I didn't complain. I never had. I was the strong one, remember? I got a job at the library within a week of arriving, and another at a cafe off campus. Some days I worked 14 hours between shifts and classes. I sold plasma when rent got tight. Skipped meals when books cost more than I expected. Brielle, meanwhile, was posting cappuccino art from Paris on her study abroad. When I emailed Mom to ask for $60 to buy a used textbook, the message stayed unread. But when Brielle posted about switching majors for the 3rd time, this time to interior design, the whole family threw a virtual party in the group chat. Still, I didn't break. I didn't cry. I didn't give up. I just worked harder. Then came the sociology paper. It was just supposed to be another assignment. But my professor, Dr. Rhonda Lively, emailed me back the same night. Audrey, your writing is piercing and layered. I'd like to nominate you for a research assistant position. I read that line so many times I nearly memorized it. Someone saw me. Not because I was strong. Not because I kept going. But because I was excellent. That changed everything. By my second semester, I was selected to join the department's main research project. I published a paper. I was offered a spot at a national symposium. And through it all, I paid every bill myself, worked every shift, missed every holiday gathering. Not that anyone noticed. I applied for the Halstead Foundation's Summer Independent Research Program, less than 10% acceptance rate, and got in. When I told my mom, her first response wasn't congratulations. It was, so you're not coming home this summer? That's when it hit me. I could win a Nobel Prize and they'd still be too busy getting Brielle a new handbag. Then came the final insult. May 18th, 11 a.m., was my graduation ceremony. I'd sent the invite in January, months in advance. No one responded. But Brielle's graduation party? Mom sent out glittery digital invitations with RSVP links, and guess what time it was? 11 a.m. Same day. Same hour. I called, hard in my throat. Mom, it's the same day. Oh, she said, casual as ever. We didn't notice. Maybe we can swing by your ceremony first? You can't swing by, I said quietly. It's my graduation. There was silence. Then she sighed. Sweetheart, the whole family's coming to Brielle's party. We've already paid for the venue. I didn't respond. I just hung up. That night, I wrote a speech, not for the school, not for the stage. For myself. I wrote it because I needed something to hold on to while the people who were supposed to hold me up chose to look away. What came next? That's where the story turns. Because that summer, I didn't just graduate. I won. The morning of my graduation arrived with quiet sun and a strange calm. I woke before dawn, showered in silence, and ironed my black gown one last time in the shared dorm laundry room. My roommate Natalie had left a note, "Go kill it, Audrey. You deserve every second of the spotlight." No one else in my life had said that. Not my mother, not my father, not even Brielle. But somehow, that scrap of paper meant more than any party invite they'd sent her. By 9:15 a.m., I was on the shuttle heading toward the university lawn where commencement would take place. Other students rode with flowers in hand, surrounded by parents and grandparents. I sat by the window, gown folded neatly in my lap, gripping a small envelope that held something even more valuable than a diploma. The Chancellor's office had emailed me late the night before. Savannah Morgan, the Academic Council and University Board are honored to announce that you have been selected as the recipient of the Chancellor's Award for Academic Perseverance and Excellence. I'd read that sentence so many times I could still feel the tears I didn't let fall. I hadn't told anyone. Why would I? My family would have brushed it off with, "That's nice, sweetie. Brielle just got accepted to Florence." But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. I arrived early, stood in line for my regalia check, and found my seat in the third row of sociology majors. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the surreal weight of what was about to happen. I was going to be seen, not just by my professors, but by a stage, an audience, an institution that had watched me work and finally said, "She matters." When the president of the university stepped up to the podium and adjusted the microphone, I barely breathed. I knew what came next. His words were crisp, rehearsed, but when he said my name, it still sent a jolt through my chest. This year's Chancellor's Award for Academic Perseverance and Excellence goes to Savannah Morgan. Applause thundered. It was real. It echoed. I stood, walked up to the stage with steady steps, and received a plaque etched with my name in delicate serif font. My gown brushed the floor. My hands didn't shake. No one called out from the crowd. No bouquet was waiting for me after. But I smiled anyway. Because this moment? It belonged to me. After the ceremony, I headed toward the small reception next to the Central Library. Professor Lively greeted me at the entrance with that knowing smile she wore when she was proud but didn't want to say too much. A few fellow honorees clinked glasses with lemonade and posed for photos. I lingered by the edge of the group, unsure how to take up space among people who seemed so effortlessly celebrated. That's when I saw her. An older woman with silver hair cut into a clean bob, and a navy coat buttoned at the collar. She moved with the kind of composure only years of being underestimated could teach. She approached me and extended her hand. "You must be Savannah," she said. I nodded, unsure how she knew my name. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Wright. Anthropology PhD, class of '79. I'm the one behind the new scholarship bearing your name." I blinked. "My name?" She smiled gently. "Yes. The Savannah Morgan Resilience Scholarship. For first-generation students with financial independence and exceptional academic achievement." She handed me a white envelope. Inside was the formal notice, $150,000 in endowment funds. Launching next fall. A scholarship in my name. "I read your file," she said. "You didn't just survive. You built something out of nothing. People like you don't just need money. They need to be seen." I clutched the envelope as my throat tightened. No one had ever connected my name to something beautiful before. Dr. Wright didn't need me to perform for her love. She gave it freely, because she saw the weight of the work behind the quiet. I didn't cry until I got back to the dorm. Alone. In the dark. With only the sound of the fan spinning above my head and the envelope still clutched in my hand like a talisman. I cried because someone had finally named the pain. Not as shame, but as strength. 3 days later, I was standing in the administration building lobby, waiting to meet Professor Lively for a farewell reception with the department. My Chancellor's Award sash still draped across my shoulders. The plaque tucked beneath my arm. That's when the doors opened. The sound of heels clacking against marble made me turn. My mother. My father. And Brielle. Brielle was dressed in a crisp white sundress, her makeup perfect, hair curled. She held a bouquet of lilies. Dad was in a silver gray shirt, Mom in a cream blazer. They froze when they saw me. I didn't move. "Savannah," Mom said, stepping forward. "We didn't know you were getting such a big award. Why didn't you say anything?" Dad added. I stared at them. I'd waited my whole life for them to show up. And now, when everything was already done, when the cameras had stopped flashing and the applause had faded, now they appeared? "I already received my degree," I said. "I already took the photos." There was an awkward silence. Brielle shifted beside them, eyes flicking to the plaque. "I didn't expect you to get the Chancellor's Award," she said. You never told anyone." I met her eyes. "Did you ever ask?" Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad looked away. For the first time in my life, they had no explanation. "We were focused on Brielle," Mom said softly. "But today is still special. We made a reservation at River and Oak. We can move it up." "No." They all froze. "I already have plans. With people who showed up when I needed them." "We're your family," Dad said, his voice low. I looked him straight in the eye. For 4 years, I handled everything on my own. Food. Tuition. health. And every time I did something good, you were busy cheering for Brielle. Now you want to celebrate me? After it's over? Brielle placed the bouquet on the front desk. I didn't know, she whispered. I was fine because I had to be, I said. Not because it was easy. Not because I didn't want someone to care. They stood still. Like statues made of regret. You want to fix this? I added. Prove it. But not tonight. Not with dinner reservations and last-minute flowers. I walked away. Their voices trailed behind me, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the air was crisp. The stairs felt lighter with each step. At the bottom, Professor Lively was waiting. She held a small paper bag and smiled when she saw me. You made it, she said. I did, I replied. On my own 2 feet. And for the first time in my life. I believed that was enough. I didn't go to River and Oak. I didn't even go back to the dorm right away. Instead, I walked the path that circled the southern end of campus, the quiet side, where oak trees filtered the late afternoon light and the air smelled faintly of honeysuckle. I passed the English building, the library steps, the rusted memorial bench with initials carved in the wood. These were places that had witnessed me becoming someone no one else knew. When I reached the final curve of the path, I stopped to sit beneath one of the old trees and took out my phone. I didn't open the family group chat. I didn't check Instagram. I opened my email instead, and read Dr. Wright's message one more time. You don't have to be the one who proves anything anymore, Savannah. Now you get to live. And build. And be. That night, I hosted my own little celebration with a few people who had become my chosen circle. Professor Lively brought lavender tea cookies, Natalie came with grocery store flowers, and Lena, the sophomore who once asked how I did everything, arrived with sparkling cider and whispered, I told everyone you'd do something big. We sat in the staff room of the sociology department, shared leftover pizza, and passed around my Chancellor's Award like it was a newborn baby. There was laughter. Real, honest laughter. No one asked me to tone myself down, no one blinked away or redirected the conversation to someone shinier. For the first time, I felt like I didn't have to shrink to make space for someone else's glory. The following week, I moved into a tiny studio apartment in downtown Atlanta. I'd accepted a job offer from an education policy nonprofit, coordinating scholarship programs between universities and community organizations. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't come with a 6-figure salary or a corner office. But it was mine. And every day, I woke up knowing I wasn't just pushing paper. I was helping kids like me, overlooked, underestimated, forced to scrape together futures from rejection and scraps, get a seat at the table. My name appeared on the advisory board of the newly launched Savannah Morgan Resilience Grant. Just seeing it there, in print, in public, felt surreal. It wasn't vanity. It was proof that everything I built in silence had been real. Each month, I had a virtual check-in with the first recipient of the scholarship. Her name was Talia. A sophomore from Haiti, double majoring in sociology and public health. She worked weekends at a farmer's market, lived in a shared house with 2 other students, and sometimes skipped meals just to make rent. She reminded me of myself, not in appearance or voice, but in that look. The one you get when you've been tired for so long, exhaustion becomes part of your personality. That look was in her sunken cheeks, her cracked knuckles, her eyes that stayed sharp even when her voice trembled. During our third call, she let out a sigh and said, Miss Savannah, I know this sounds dramatic, but I don't think rich people understand what it feels like to eat plain white bread all week just to afford books. I smiled, nodded. They don't. But I do. She looked up, shocked. You? I've had to choose between textbooks and electricity, I told her. I've been the girl who skipped laundry so I could afford a data plan to submit an assignment. You're not alone, Talia. You're not invisible. And in that moment, I realized I'd become the person I'd always needed growing up, the adult who listens without judgment, who doesn't tell you to suck it up just because you're strong. At Dr. Wright's suggestion, I started therapy. She sent me a list of 3 women and said, pick the one who doesn't make you feel like you have to be okay all the time. I chose Ellis. Soft-spoken. Middle-aged. Never once told me to forgive and forget. She asked questions like, what did your 15-year-old self need most? My first answer was money. My second was time. But in the 3rd session, I broke down and said, she needed someone who picked her. Who didn't just hand her responsibility because no one else wanted it. The tears that came weren't dramatic. They were quiet. Steady. Like water leaking from a pipe no one noticed had cracked. December came. Atlanta turned gray and wet, a city of steel skies and steaming breath on subway platforms. I spent the holidays alone in my apartment, but not lonely. I read books, updated my files, baked cornbread and sent leftovers to the neighbor across the hall. And then, on a random Thursday, a text buzzed through from an unknown number. Brielle, are you free for coffee this weekend? I stared at the screen. It had been 6 months since graduation. I hadn't heard a word from her since that awkward, too late confrontation in the lobby. I didn't answer right away. But 2 hours later, I typed. Sunday noon. Delancey's. She arrived before me. Sat at a window table, scarf draped neatly around her neck, nails perfectly painted. When I walked in, she stood to hug me, something we hadn't done in years. Thanks for coming, she said. I nodded, sat. Ordered cocoa instead of coffee. We chatted for a while about nothing, the weather, the traffic, the cost of eggs. And then she got quiet. I didn't realize, she said at last. I mean, not really. I didn't know how far you'd come. Or how far you had to walk alone. I didn't respond. Just sipped slowly. I guess, she continued, I always thought things came easy for you. Like, you were just the kind of person who figured it out. And I always needed help. That's what they told us, I said. That I was strong. That you were sensitive. So guess who got supported? And guess who had to survive? She blinked, but didn't deny it. I don't know how to make that right. You can't, I said. But you can stop assuming that quiet means okay. We left it at that. As we stood outside, coats pulled tight against the chill, she offered something else. Next time you speak at a panel, invite me. I want to come. I didn't promise. But for the first time, I believed she might mean it. January rolled in like a quiet promise. A new year. A new season. But the same city streets, the same hustle of trains and office doors, the same echo in the apartment at night when the heater clicked off and the world stilled. I was 23 now. A sociology graduate with a job that didn't pay much but felt meaningful. Every morning, I walked past rows of buildings where people in tailored suits hustled in with lattes and AirPods. But I wasn't envious. Not anymore. They didn't know what it meant to stand on your own. I did. I hung my diploma in a cheap but sturdy frame above my desk, next to a quote that Professor Lively gave me on the last day of the semester. It read, "True worth isn't found in the spotlight, but in the steps you took when no one was watching." That quote kept me anchored, especially on the hard days. I received my first request to speak at a public forum that February, a university leadership panel titled Against the Odds, The Power of First-Gen Graduates. My name had been recommended by Dr. Wright. I was the youngest person on the docket, but also the only one whose scholarship carried their name. I wrote my speech over 2 weekends and rehearsed it late at night, standing barefoot on the hardwood floor of my apartment. I didn't want applause. I just wanted someone in that crowd, some girl barely holding it together, to hear me and think, maybe I'm not crazy for trying. The day of the event, I wore the same black blazer I had at graduation. I didn't own anything fancier. But I carried something better, confidence that wasn't borrowed from anyone else's approval. The panel went better than I expected. Students lined up afterward to ask questions. One girl, with a cracked phone and a nervous smile, whispered, "Thank you for not pretending it was easy." When I returned to my seat, there she was in the back row. Brielle. Wearing soft denim and a look I couldn't read. She clapped, didn't try to wave. Just watched me like someone seeing a person they thought they knew, and realizing they didn't. Later that night, she texted. "You were real. I never saw you that way before. I'm sorry for always calling you strong like it was a compliment. I see now how much it actually cost you." I stared at that message for a while before replying. "I don't need you to apologize. I need you to stop thinking I was okay just because I didn't scream." We didn't talk again for weeks. But something shifted. A fragile truce, maybe. Or maybe just the first stone removed from the wall that had been built between us since childhood. Spring came fast in Atlanta. Warm rains, blooming sidewalks, park benches filled with students holding books they only half read. I spent more time in the field now, traveling to campuses across Georgia to meet scholarship candidates, hosting seminars on educational inequality, mentoring students who reminded me of my old self. Then, one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Cream envelope. Elegant cursive. It was from Dr. Wright. "Savannah. I wanted to let you know that we've secured funding to expand the Resilience Grant into a nationwide initiative. Your name will now appear not just on the website, but on every award letter. Every time a student opens that envelope, they will know that someone like you walked before them. You didn't just survive. You set a path. With admiration. Eleanor Wright." I held that letter against my chest and sat on the couch in silence. For once, I didn't feel like I had to share the news to make it real. I wasn't looking for my mom's congratulations or my dad's approval. Their silence no longer hurt. It had just become background noise. But still, I wasn't made of stone. That summer, I got a call from home. Not from my parents. From my Aunt Viv. "Your mom's been talking about you a lot lately," she said. "She showed us your award. Told the whole room about the scholarship. I think, maybe she's starting to realize." I didn't say anything at first. "I'm not saying it fixes everything," Aunt Viv continued. "But it's something. Maybe they didn't know how much they missed until you stopped asking them to see you." I hung up and stared at my bookshelf. On the middle shelf, wedged between two policy manuals, was the Chancellor's Award plaque. I hadn't dusted it in a while. But it still gleamed in the late afternoon sun. A week later, Brielle texted again. "I want to ask something. Can I nominate you for our school's alumni spotlight? They're looking for grads who've done meaningful work. And I think it's time someone told your story where we all grew up." I didn't answer for 2 days. Then I replied. "Only if you really mean it. Not as a sister. But as someone who now understands." She responded. "I do. Maybe it wasn't closure. Maybe that word was too clean, too final. But it was a beginning. A shift." That fall, the Savannah Morgan Resilience Grant reached its first nationwide applicant pool. Over 100 students applied. 12 were selected. The girl who ate a melting cake in a lonely backyard now had a name that would change lives. And I still lived simply. Still drank store-brand coffee. Still folded my laundry late on Sundays. But now, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see someone surviving. I saw someone who had built a life out of the pieces no one else thought mattered. The first time I sat across from a Savannah Morgan Resilience Grant recipient in person, I nearly forgot how to breathe. It was a small campus in North Carolina, not Ivy League, not flashy, just a quiet liberal arts school nestled in pine trees and red brick. I was scheduled to do a check-in visit with one of our newest scholars, a sophomore named Angelica Ruiz. She walked into the meeting room wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big and carrying a binder duct taped at the seams. She shook my hand and said, "I've been waiting to meet you." "I've been looking forward to this, too," I said, and meant it more than I could explain. We sat down, and she opened up. She talked about caring for her younger siblings while her mother worked 2 jobs. She talked about studying between shifts at the grocery store, about skipping meals so her brother could have seconds. She talked about how, for a long time, she thought being invisible was the price of being dependable. Every word felt like an echo of my own past. And then she said something that stuck with me. "I didn't think people like me got seen. But then I read the scholarship letter. Your story was in it. And I thought, if she could do it, maybe I'm not crazy for trying." It wasn't pride that welled up in my chest, it was something deeper. Recognition. That after years of being the girl no one clapped for, I had become the hand reaching back through the dark. I hugged her when we finished. I don't know if that broke some sort of professional boundary. I didn't care. The week after, I spoke at a small high school in Clayton County. Low graduation rates. No library funding. Broken lockers and a principal who'd been fighting for air conditioners for 4 years. But when I told my story, students leaned in like it mattered. Like I mattered. One girl cried. Another boy stayed behind and said, "I didn't think anyone understood what it's like to be called responsible just because nobody checks if you're okay." I left with a notebook full of names, kids who wanted more but didn't know how to ask. And on the train ride home, I did something unexpected. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. "Savannah? Is everything okay?" Her voice was cautious, soft, like a person who knows they might not be welcome anymore. "I'm fine," I said. "Just wanted to say. I'm doing well." "That's good, honey," she said quickly. "I saw your name on the website. The scholarship thing. It's amazing." There was a pause. We didn't know how hard it was for you." "Not really." Another pause. "No excuse for that. I just wanted to say. I'm proud of you. Truly." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I could hear something in her voice I hadn't heard in years, guilt. And maybe a little awe. "Thank you," I said. Then gently, it would have helped to hear that when I was scraping together grocery money in college. "I know," she replied. "I know." We didn't talk much more that night. I didn't expect miracles. But it was something. The next weekend, I hosted a private dinner at my apartment for a few new grant recipients in the Atlanta area. Just 6 students. Pizza boxes, paper plates, and a lot of nervous laughter. I told them about my first day at college, walking alone to my dorm with a teddy bear and a second-hand laptop. They told me about their first failed exams, their fears about never being enough. One of them, a boy named Marcus, looked at me and said, "Sometimes, I think my family only loves the version of me that's winning. Not the one who's just tired." And for once, I didn't try to wrap it in a pretty answer. "I get it," I said. "I really do." That night, I received a voice message from Brielle. I read the article they published in the alumni newsletter. I cried. "I didn't even know half of what you went through. I feel like I'm still learning who you really are." Then she added something I didn't expect. "I told Mom and Dad they should have been there at graduation. I think they know now. Maybe too late for then, but not too late forever." She paused. "If you ever let me come to one of your talks again, I'll bring the camera. Not for Instagram. Just because I want you to have proof that someone showed up." I listened twice. And saved it. Not because I needed it. but because, after years of hearing silence in all the moments that mattered, the small, golden, fragile moments, it felt like a different kind of music. The next morning, I opened a draft email that had been sitting in my inbox for over a year. It was addressed to the administration office of my old high school. The subject line, guest speaker request. The body was still blank. But I knew what I'd write next. I was ready to go back, not as the girl they forgot, but as the woman they'd remember. The air outside Pineview High was exactly as I remembered it, thick with Georgia humidity and the faint smell of chalk dust from the aging classrooms. Nothing had changed. The cracked sidewalk still curved in the same awkward tilt. The main office still had that fading poster reading "Every student counts," as if the exclamation mark could hide the truth. But this time, I wasn't a student walking in with a heavy backpack and silent frustration. I was the keynote speaker. I had reached out months earlier, half expecting to be ignored. But the principal, Mr. Kelson, who had barely remembered my name when I graduated, sent back a glowing acceptance letter and even added, "We'd be honored to have one of our own return to inspire the next generation." It was strange, standing at the front of the auditorium where I used to sit invisible in the back row, scribbling poems in the margins of my notebooks. The same red velvet curtains, the same flickering stage lights. But this time, all eyes were on me. I opened with the truth. I wasn't the girl anyone expected to return with honors. I wasn't the one who got the flowers or the praise. But I was the one who stayed late, worked double shifts, and studied through tears. And if you've ever felt like you were only loved when you made life easier for others, I see you. There was a stillness in the room. Not disinterest, attention. A hush that meant they were listening, really listening. I told them about washing dishes after midnight while editing term papers. About crying in the bathroom at work after finding out my sister got another luxury trip while I couldn't even afford toothpaste. I told them how my family skipped my graduation, and how I still showed up. Because not all applause comes from the crowd. Sometimes, it comes from the echo of your own footsteps when you decide to keep walking anyway. When I finished, the auditorium exploded into applause. Afterward, students lined up to speak to me, some crying, some just squeezing my hand. One girl whispered, "My mom only loves me when I clean the house. Not when I'm tired. Not when I need help." I bent down and looked her in the eye. That doesn't define your worth. That night, I sat in my car in the school parking lot, watching the building where I once felt like a ghost. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was legacy. And I wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I flew to New York to speak at a national education conference. The organizers introduced me as Savannah Morgan, founder, scholar, and advocate for the invisible students who built their futures with no applause. I wore a navy blue pantsuit I found on sale, heels from an outlet store, and confidence tailored only by experience. The panel was packed. College deans, non-profit directors, journalists. And in the front row? Brielle. She flew in on her own dime. No announcement. No fuss. She didn't come backstage. She just sat there quietly, phone turned off, eyes locked on me. My voice didn't shake. Not even when I recited the part that still felt like an exposed nerve. I was the responsible daughter. The one who didn't cry. Who didn't ask. The one who skipped parties, ignored birthdays, and said, "I'm fine," when I was anything but. People thought I was strong. But strength isn't the absence of need. It's the decision to show up when no one else does. Applause filled the ballroom. After the event, Brielle waited near the exit. When I saw her, I hesitated. Then she said, "You owned that room." I smiled. I finally know how. She reached into her purse and handed me a small, square box. Inside was a silver necklace, simple, engraved with one word. Unseen. I looked up. "I wanted to give you something that didn't celebrate what the world sees," she said, voice trembling. but what you carried when no one was watching. For the first time in a long time, I hugged her and didn't feel like I was hugging my own resentment. It felt clean. Earned. Real. Back in Atlanta, I received a package forwarded from my old college address. It was from Professor Lively. Inside was a journal with a note. Start writing your book. The world needs your voice. You no longer have to shout to be heard. You just have to speak. I stared at the blank first page, fingers trembling slightly. Then I picked up a pen. And I wrote. Chapter 1, I was always the strong one. Until I learned that even strong ones bleed. And they, too, deserve to be loved. By the time autumn rolled around again, the Savannah Morgan Resilience Grant had funded over 30 students across 10 states. My photo was on the homepage of a national education magazine under the headline, "The Girl Who Made Silence Her Stage." But the best moment came quietly, like most real ones do. It was a Thursday. Chilly. I was walking through Grant Park in Atlanta, sipping lukewarm tea, when my phone buzzed with a video message from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. The video began with shaky hands and giggling in the background. It was filmed in a classroom, students seated in a circle, all wearing t-shirts with "Resilient" printed across the front. In the center stood a girl no older than 17, holding up a sign that read, "I got in. Thank you, Savannah Morgan." She began crying mid-sentence. I just got my acceptance letter, and the scholarship too. No one in my family's been to college before. And I wouldn't be here if you hadn't made me believe I could matter. The camera panned to a whiteboard where someone had written, "Inspired by Audrey." I froze. Audrey. My real name. Somehow, somewhere along the way, they had found out the name I didn't use in speeches. Not because I was ashamed, but because it belonged to a version of me who had once believed love was something you had to earn through suffering. Tears came fast and unexpected. Not out of sadness. Not even joy. But from that rare and unnameable emotion that comes when the weight you carried finally proves it was never for nothing. I sat on a bench, let the wind tangle in my hair, and whispered to the air, "You did it, Audrey." Later that night, Brielle called. "Guess what?" she said. "Mom's joining a mentorship program for single moms returning to college." She said something you said made her realize she's been teaching survival instead of support. I blinked. "She said that?" "She did," Brielle replied. "And she asked if she could send a donation to your fund." I laughed softly, leaning against my window as the city lights began flickering on. "I don't want her money." "I know. She said you'd say that. So instead, she's sending handwritten letters to each of your scholarship recipients this year. Just encouragement. No conditions." I didn't know what to say. But maybe that was the point. Some things aren't about finishing with a dramatic moment. They're about waking up one day and realizing you no longer need the apology to live free. A month later, I spoke at my final panel of the year, a statewide summit on student equity. The crowd was huge. At least 800 people. Cameras. Reporters. A standing ovation before I even began. But when I stood at the mic, I didn't talk about policy or data. I talked about a girl in a backyard, with a misspelled name on a cheap birthday cake. A girl who grew up hearing "You're strong" so much it became a muzzle. I said, "You don't have to break to deserve help. You don't have to scream to be seen. And you don't have to prove your worth to people too blind to recognize it. Your path doesn't have to start with applause. It can start in silence. In pain. In the quiet decision to keep going. And someday, someone will walk a little easier because you did." They didn't just applaud. They wept. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe I had truly arrived. Not because I had made it in spite of everything. But because I had turned everything into a reason to rise. Audrey's journey is a powerful reminder that resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, keep going, through years of silence, pain, and invisibility. Her strength wasn't just in enduring, it was in transforming abandonment into advocacy, invisibility into impact. She didn't wait for permission. She wrote her own future. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the strong one, the one who never got asked if you were okay, let this story remind you, your quiet work matters. And someday, it will speak louder than the praise you never received. Share your thoughts in the comments. Who in your life deserves to be seen for their silent strength? And don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where real stories find their voice.